Okay, Tom, thank you so much for joining me on Champion Chat. We're here to have a conversation around the North East Link project, what you know about it. Being a resident of Rosanna and a very well-known resident in Rosanna, you have a lot of connections and you know a lot of people, they know you. Wanted to have a chat around what your understanding is of the council discontinuing the journey to the Supreme Court and what is coming up for you, for your neighbours, the community, and what your understanding is of this project, the North East Link project. So I wanted to start with, what are you hearing around the traps in Rosanna? What is your understanding of what's happening there? How does this impact?
Well, it's been incredibly quiet. I think most people are so focused on the coronavirus, and the North East Link has certainly fallen off the top of their agenda. And I think Corona is so much front and centre in everyone's mind. It's all people are thinking about. You turn the television on, it's all you hear about, it's all you read about. People are just so focused on it. The North East Link it's just got down on people's agenda on their concerns, and I was quite surprised actually when they put all those boards up in Balasia Reserves. I thought we would get some response from the community. There've been a few complaints. A lot of the work they're already doing on Greensboro Road has been quite disruptive, but and given that people are very anxious, I thought that people would be coming out very upset, but it's just so low on the priority list at the moment for most people that it's hardly caused any issues at all. I think once the main work gets underway, well, I think the next big thing will be is when they have the preferred contractor, preferred tender, and they actually start revealing what the final design is going to look like. That will be the next big issue. But as we know, the problem is when we get that document to see what the final design looks like, the contract's signed. So part of the agreement we reached with the state government about us withdrawing our legal court action was that we'd be involved in that final design, and our engineers would have input into how the Lower Plenty Road interchange, for instance, is designed. And I think that's incredibly important, and one of the reasons we did decide to continue the Supreme Court action. Otherwise, we would have been locked out of that process. So it's very important there. And also, there's all sorts of considerations, like they still haven't agreed that once the North East Link's finished, then Rosanna Road would have permanent truck bans on it. So it was very important that we actually stay in negotiations, that we stay in a position where we can continue to influence this project throughout the course of its construction. Because once the final design's known, and everything's decided, then the construction work will start in earnest, and that will have a huge impact. And it's the 200 metre rule at the moment. Currently, people that live close to where they're doing the works are quite upset and quite disturbed. But as more and more people become aware of the size and the disruption this project is going to cause for such a long period, and I think that the issues will just explode.
Yeah, it's sort of like, it's almost like the worst is yet to come. It's not real until it starts. Yeah, and obviously where the early works are down at the bottom of Greensboro Highway there, it started for the residents in Viewbank and the residents in Yallambee. It started for them, and there are residents in Viewbank who can't sleep at night. As in, they physically aren't being allowed to sleep because the sound of the early works is impacting them all over across the other side of Lower Plenty Road, and they're saying we can't sleep. We're being interrupted by the truck noises and the brakes and the activity that's going on there, and yet there's meant to be a curfew, and this works are still going. So how does that work? So I get that there's confusion. Yeah.
And as you said, there's a curfew there, so what the argument would be, well, after 8 o'clock, there's very little movement in the streets. Why wouldn't you start your work at 8 o'clock instead of starting it at midnight, which they seem to be doing? But you go back even a step further to think the early works is proceeding. Now that COVID's had this massive impact on all of us and a wrecking ball to our economy, can the state now afford a $16 billion project? And I know they'll talk about jobs,
Mm-hmm.
but then North East Link does produce a lot of jobs, and you'd think for $16 billion it should. But then there's other ways you could spend $16 billion, which would generate a lot more jobs than the North East Link. The vast majority of the money is in the tunnel boring machine and the concrete and getting rid of the dirt.
Mm.
But the issue about the North East Link, and this is why I think the government will be re-looking at their business cases. Once the North East Link's finished, there are no ongoing jobs. Whereas other projects they can undertake for 16 billion would generate more jobs in the short term, but then there'd be ongoing jobs as well. So, and I keep thinking the North East Link option A was chosen when we're in a whole different world, when the Eastern Freeway was bottlenecked all the way from the Chandler Highway into Hoddle Street every morning and every night. But that world's changed now, and now people's travel patterns have changed. And you've only got to see in the real estate market how Bendigo and Ballarat and these towns are booming, because people are now saying, well, I can live in Ballarat and commute one day a week into the city and work from home. And I always think you're not working from home, you're actually living at work. And people are saying, well, if I'm going to live at work, I want to make sure my office is as big, as comfortable and as spacious as I can. So the attraction in living in places like Richmond in particular, where you live there and you compromised your living arrangements, you compromised the size of your yard if you had one, just so you'd be close to work. If you don't need to be close to work anymore, and you're working from home and there's several people in your same building or apartment, wherever you're in, and you're fighting for a bit of desk space and you're fighting for who gets the end of the kitchen table to do their work, you're better off moving somewhere a bit bigger where you can actually have a separate office, if you like, or where people at the other end of the house can be doing their work and you're not disturbed. Whereas you're living in a smallish apartment in Richmond, you're going to be disturbed constantly. Particularly if you have children that are being homeschooled. And so do you want to actually move somewhere where you can live and work in comfort? And if you're only going to the city once a week, and let's face it, 75% of people who are currently working from home saying they want to continue to work from home. And I know working from home is more productive for a lot of people, but it doesn't. The issue is the relationships you need to build. You don't build those working from home. So there is a need for people to get together, talk about what they're doing, what they're working on, to build those relationships and that trust that you need to work with people successfully. So people will need to still come together, but it won't be 5 days a week.
And do you know what's really interesting? Being in real estate and being very well connected with my colleagues in real estate, we're always in tune with what our buyers are saying, what they want, what's happening for them, and also where our vendors are going to and what they need and what they want. And we share that information in our sales meetings and just in regular phone calls. And something that's coming up in apparently realestate.com, the expression home office is coming up a lot as this is what I want in my next house. And I was talking about this a few months ago when we were in the start of our first lockdown back in April. There was a conversation with my plumber around and the executive director of BNI. We were having conversations around this may lead to houses or homes being renovated differently or designed differently, and including a home office or 2 home offices even, or more space for kids to put their desks in a bedroom or something like that, because there is now the reality, regardless of how long this lockdown goes for or these COVID restrictions go for, regardless of that, you're right, people are starting to get used to being at home and living at home, and therefore I want my office to be ergonomically friendly and attractive and aesthetic for my mental health and my physical health, as well as my success at work. So therefore I need this, and this. And so, home office, the concept of a home office is becoming a lot more popular and a lot more valuable in property. Yeah, so that's
So
a
you
really good
imagine,
point to make.
so you imagine your average rumpus room will be renamed to the boardroom or the CEO of the house main
That's right.
office.
Yeah, that's
You
right.
know, your office won't be the smallest bedroom anymore. The office will be, the rumpus room, or
A
which will be
theatre room.
converted. But the other thing I think about, and if we're fortunate enough to be re-elected at the next election, and we have 9 councillors, and obviously we'll have 2 new ones, at least 2 new councillors. How do you build a relationship with them on these Zoom meetings? And I know the Zoom meetings are working well with us because we understand each other, we know each other, and we trust each other. Whereas once you go to a whole new world where you haven't built up those relationships and you're trying to do it on a Zoom meeting, it's incredibly difficult. So,
It is, it is challenging. And look, this is an argument that, that comes up. And look, being a member of BNI, Business Network International, which is all around networking, which is face-to-face, when we started going online to have our weekly Zoom meetings back in mid-March. So we've been having BNI meetings every week online, Zoom, since mid-March. And while, yes, many of us have that relationship just in our chapter, we have that relationship. We do have, we've got one particular McLeod resident. He's actually a printer. And so he's Printer McLeod. He's joined our chapter, and we don't know how tall he is. We don't know. We don't know how long his legs are. We've only ever seen him like this. So we know what work he does. And I've seen his work today actually down in Montmorency. So I know what the calibre of his work is, but we don't know what he looks like, and we have a laugh. But yeah, you're right. That humanity isn't there unless you're in the same room, and it can be challenging to create those relationships. But you know what? We're all doing the same thing. We're all in the same boat. Look, I personally have created some connections through visiting other BNI chapters through Zoom that I would not be able to do if we were still meeting face to face. And I've created connections, and I've now got clients through real estate, through meeting in a Zoom meeting. And so I've gone to Sydney. I actually would like to visit Norwich in England and just sit in on a Zoom meeting. So the Zoom meetings allow us to be wherever we are that's safe and that's comfortable, and be anywhere else in the world at the same time. So we allow for that. We still allow for communication. You're right, what we're not allowing for is that humanity that you can only get by being in the same room as another human being.
So we bring this back to the North East Link discussion. Under this changed world we're now living in, and I must admit, I had a meeting in this, normally would have been in the city, but it went from 4 till 6 one night last week, and I was doing that from home. And there was a meeting at Greensborough that went from 6 till 8. So under normal circumstances, I would have missed the first hour of the Greensborough meeting, but in this case, I could just click a couple of clicks, and I've gone from the city to Greensborough.
Yes.
And I got on time to attend. So that's the upside of this. But now that COVID has hit and people's working patterns, and as they're saying, the city will probably never really return back to being the hub of the whole Melbourne area it was, where a huge percentage of the people worked there. It was the powerhouse that generated all the economic activity. That's changed now. And if you look at the North East Link, part of the reason option A was chosen was because it was basically, some people's minds, completed the ring road, but also provided a better access into the city. So effectively a northern freeway into the city. And is that now still the requirement, given that? But the other thing that's going to be challenging for the city and for not just Melbourne, but after this, they're saying public transport usage will not return to what it was. Now, people are very good. You think in the last 6 months, we've adapted enormously, changed, just the way we live has changed. So imagine once there is an antidote to this virus, we quickly return back to where we were. But I think people now realise, well, working from home does work.
Mm.
And people that have these huge office buildings in the city where they're paying an enormous amount of rent, and they're only used during the day, if they're thinking, well, I can save a little bit more rental money and I don't quite need all these floors now.
Yep.
So I think they'll be very keen to have the majority of their workers still working from home a lot of the time.
Yep.
Because it will save enormously on their rent.
That's it. And that can happen if if we've all got a telephone, which essentially we do, or access to one, or we all have our information in like a CRM, and we can access everything digitally. We can work anywhere. We can work anywhere. Yeah.
And if you look at most businesses have moved to the cloud offerings, and
yes.
the cloud makes it even easier again because you don't need to be physically in an office to connect to their servers, to their databases, or whatever, because most businesses have moved to the cloud operation. And so it doesn't matter where you are, you can get access to everything you need.
Yes.
So,
yeah.
The world, and you know, the internet, it is so much better now than it ever has been before. Like some people would argue the NBN was rolled out just in the nick of time, but I hate to think what Christmas is going to be like. We're still in lockdown and everyone's trying to do a Zoom meeting at lunchtime on Christmas Day. I think the internet will melt that day.
Yes, it will.
It's just not going to be able to cope. But hopefully things will be a bit easier by Christmas and we will be able to have some sort of normality. But it's hard to imagine if we do find an antidote for this or a vaccine, the world's not going to go back to where it was, nowhere near. And the other really concerning thing for most people is a lot of the jobs that have gone will not come back, and that's the real concern.
Yeah,
particularly in the retail sector. That's going to be the big problem. That hospitality will return to some degree, but then if people are working from home, they're not going out for lunch every day. They're not all those office blocks. You know, it's like in the city at 12:30. Everyone pours out of the office blocks and goes to the nearest cafe and restaurant for lunch.
Yeah.
That's not going to happen as much.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, how long will it take for tourism to get back to the levels it was at pre-COVID?
Yeah. And the reality is, you know what, for that kind of movement and large groups, so the large group gatherings, you know, like the festivals and the weddings and all those parties and the travel, they're going to be the last things that come back, and yet they may not come back to the level that they were 12 months ago, you know, I'll say 12 months ago. But it's going to, honestly, I think that will be another at least 12 months, if not the start of maybe 2022. There may be a change with that. There may be some gradual coming back to travel and group gatherings. But again, it wouldn't surprise me if there's still that restriction. And therefore that movement isn't quite going to be there that there was 12 months ago. Yeah.
And if people's economics, like people travel when things are going well, depends how long this goes on for and the damage it does do. People will simply not have the funds to travel like we used to.
Oh yeah, there's that too. Yeah, yeah.
And then we're already seeing it in Australia that, you know, the rationalisation of the the couriers, so there won't be that competition within the market to bring the prices to what people can afford. So the days of, you know, $25 to the Gold Coast and, you know, these special buys that because we had such capacity, that's not going to return quickly either.
Yeah, yeah. May come at some point, but not in a hurry. And look, I get your point with retail. There's a lot of online now. A lot of people are just, okay, well, I can do this online, so I'll continue that. There are some jobs you said, you know, that are not going to be present, but then there are other industries and other jobs that have increased, especially technology. Things like websites and that kind of thing. There's a lot of that going on, social marketing, that sort of stuff. So those industries have increased and improved, and, you know, they're doing okay. But there's always as you know, as you hope knows, necessity is the mother of invention. So there are things coming out of this that we wouldn't have had, that wouldn't happen if we didn't have this particular lockdown or way we need to be, the way we need to act. So there'll be things coming out, just like there were the last time. So when the GFC was on, you know, WhatsApp came out of the GFC.
Because the other thing, when you look back through history, people always predicted the certain changes would be the end of life as we know it. And, and people, industrialisation, and everyone left the farms for the city, we're saying where were the jobs going to be. But will this be a catalyst for such a major social change that the idea of a 40-hour week might be called into question? Do we need to work 40 hours, or do we actually share jobs? Do we do 20 hours each or 25 hours each or whatever? So the whole concept of working 40 hours a week, 5 days a week, 9 to 5 days a week, that might just disappear as well.
Well, the reality is it's not as common as it used to be. I mean, for many, many years, for me, I remember I left uni in 1991 and I went into the hospitality industry. And that's shift work. And so from an early age, I was trained in there are 24 hours in a day and 7 days in a week. And I'm still that. At 50, I'm still thinking there are 24 hours in a day and there are 7 days in a week. And you can do whatever you want in that time and you can still be effective and you can still produce results. So, I've got people saying to me, what are you doing at 11 o'clock still sending an email? And I'm going, because I need to get this done. It's not midnight and I need to get this done. And I said I'd do it today and I'm doing it today. And it's still today. So that's why I'm doing it.
Well, the problem for me at the moment is that the Tour de France is back on. It's been very good.
I know, I saw that. Isn't that exciting? I saw that. That's so exciting. So there is hope. There's always hope.
Yep. Well, the tour's been fantastic so far. So
Yeah. So talking about cycling, what's this? What I also thought you'd love to talk about is what you're hearing about cycling paths, cycling and the trails as a result of this project. What's created? What's going on?
I've always been a bit disappointed because part of this project they are building significant paths or improving the paths up at the northern end around Watsonia. It's all leading to this bottleneck, which is Banksia Street and the Yarra Flats, where the main trail is well below the required standard and people will not use it. So it's disappointing they haven't agreed to do that, but they're not. The issue is, you can see this right across Melbourne, that people have abandoned public transport. People are now living locally, so they're not going to work anymore. They're staying at home, working from home. They want to get out, and when they get out, they're not driving to their shops. They're riding their bike to the shop or they're walking to the shop. So this local access will be very important, very, very important. And what we're seeing is the paths that we have, or the shared paths we've got, are so incredibly busy that it's now time to actually separate the walkers from the cyclists, because it's incredibly dangerous for walkers to have people buzzing past on their bikes. But the other problem has been that electric bikes have certainly been taken up in droves, and there's been well over 100% increase in the number of bikes being sold, but a lot of those are electric bikes.
Okay.
And they enable people to go that little bit faster for longer. And we're getting these real conflicts now on our shared paths, which we've never had before. And you imagine that's going to get worse. And I look at Britain or the UK, where Boris Johnson, as part of his response to COVID and to generate jobs, has put £2 billion into cycling infrastructure, because they're saying that people want to get out, they want to get a bit of exercise, and they want to move around their local area. And we're just not doing that. They've done it in Sydney. The New South Wales government's done an enormous amount as well. The City of Melbourne's done it. The City of Melbourne had a 10-year plan for the cycle paths they wanted to create. Late last year, that 10-year plan became a 4-year plan.
Mm-hmm.
Now, since COVID, that 4-year plan has become a 1-year plan. So they're putting in 42 kilometres of separated bike lanes in the city this year.
Wow.
And the issue for us, for Melbourne as generally is, well, that's fine in the city, but how do you get in the city? And we look at Banyule, well, the cycling infrastructure in Banyule is not good. It's not good.
Okay.
The majority of the activity centres you want to get to, it's not easy. We look at the major employers like Austin. You only got to go to Latrobe. I know Latrobe University is not in Banyule, but it's on their border. You go there and it's just got a moat of cars all around it. There's not one bike path that leads to Latrobe University. The Darabin Creek path goes close, but it's incredibly dangerous to ride your bike to Latrobe, very difficult to get to. And yet we have these enormous car parks all around it. And there's so much opportunity. And in Banyule, we're extremely lucky. We do have the Main Yarra Trail, but the Main Yarra Trail is such a poor condition, very indirect. So I was hoping as part of the North East Link, they would incorporate this and actually complete some of this. Melbourne's done a reasonable job of building some cycling infrastructure, but it's only being done in patchwork. There's not a complete route. And from Banyule, if you want to ride in the city, you've got Heidelberg Road, which is incredibly dangerous. Well, you've got the Main Yarra Trail, which is very disjointed, very slow, wanders all over the place. For instance, I always think if you go to Burke Road North, in Eaglemont there, and you drive over the bridge, it goes over the Yarra, it says city 12 kilometres. If you go over that footbridge just down below that to the Main Yarra Trail there, there's a sign that says city 21 kilometres. So it's 9 kilometres further on the Main Yarra Trail than it is to drive on the freeway. And if we look at the Eastern Freeway from Burke Road into the city, it's very direct, it's very flat. Oh, the Main Yarra Trail into the city from there, it goes up and over every hill that's there. It goes over the Belford Road hill. It goes up, once you get to the Chandler Highway, you then ride up the hill on the boulevard to the highest point of the boulevard.
Okay.
As soon as you get to the highest part of the boulevard, you then go down, back to the river again, and you cross over a bridge that you're not allowed to ride your bike on that goes for over 100 metres. So, and that's part of the Main Yarra Trail. There's a bridge on the Main Yarra Trail that's 100 metres long. You're not allowed to ride your bike on.
So I'm guessing then you would like to see a seriously considered project to create safe, logical, effective cycling trail for cyclists.
And, well, there are sections they are proposing to do this, but there's a little, if you look, there's a little brown stroke as part of the North East Link, which is a new path from the Chandler Highway to Yarrabend Park Road. And I describe that as the most beautiful little brown mark I've ever saw, because it goes for about 2 kilometres. It will take about 15 minutes off travel time. Currently, if you want to go from the Chandler Highway to the Yarrabend Park Road, you need to cross over the Chandler Highway. You then need to go up a series, there used to be 70 steps, they've taken them out, but it's a very long ramp they've put in there now. Then, as I said, you go up to this highest point of the boulevard, then you go back down the river, and you cross this bridge you're not allowed to ride over. And then you snake around the Thornbury boat sheds there, and eventually you pop out there near the new prison, Yarrabend Park Road. This new bit just wipes all that out. It takes all the hills out. It takes the pipe bridge out. And it's such a logical, sensible thing to do. And the North East Link people have agreed to do it, but it should have been done years ago. And I kept thinking, for 25 years, I rode into the city every morning and every night, and I went up those 70 steps. Main Yarra Trail used to have 70 steps in it.
You counted them?
Oh, counted them. The first flight had 9, then there were 2 lots that had 10, the fourth lot had 11, and the rest all had 10 again. They were in lots of 10 except for the bottom one and the third.
Oh my God.
So
Yeah.
no, I'm not. I could. Yes. Anyway, so and yet we look at, it's not just the health aspects of it. We look at the city and it's incredibly congested. Parking's a nightmare.
Mm.
We look at the obesity problems. We look at the air pollution problems. We look at all these issues, and so many can be fixed if we had a safe, reliable cycling infrastructure. And the number one reason people don't ride their bikes is not, it's got nothing to do with the weather. It's got nothing to do with their clothing. It's all about safety.
Yeah. Okay.
Stops people from riding their bike. It's safety.
Okay.
So if we made it safe, and you look at some of these overseas countries, they get more than half their people going to work are on their bikes. More than half.
Yeah.
So it's just, and if you look at the amount of space we allocate to car parking, to roads, it's an enormous amount of our city. 25% of our city is either roads or car parking.
Yeah.
So it's an enormous space. And it's not, it hasn't served us well. Because if you look at, and there's many examples where we've built a building and then we're surrounded it by a massive car park, and then the next building's so much further away, and then we surround that by a massive amount of car parking. So you get to the point, and the classic example of that, I'm not sure if you've been to the South Marine train station, but you have the South Marine train station surrounded by an enormous car park.
Yeah.
As soon as you get past that car park, you then get into the car park for the council office, which has got another enormous car park around it. But if you go to the south, as soon as you leave the railway car parking, you then start on the shopping centre car parking.
Yeah.
So you have these three activities
car parks
that have got their own car parks around them, which means you can't move between the three of them.
Yeah.
And if you want to provide a decent bus service, the bus pulls into the shops and then has to snake its way out through the car park and then snake its way into the train station, then snake its. If you had your railway station right next to your shopping centre, right next to your commercial or your civic precinct, you got off the train and you could go to whichever one you liked, or you could go to all three of them.
Yeah.
Yet we just don't design our towns like that. We've spread everything out so much because we were so reliant on the car, and we've designed our city to rely on the car, and now people aren't as willing to do that, and because our population growth has got us to a point that it's no longer sustainable, we're having these serious problems. And
yeah. And it's interesting that you bring up other countries, certainly European countries, where people just ride their bikes. That's normal. They ride their bikes to work. What comes up for me for lots of parts of Europe, certainly the mountainous areas. I've visited the French Alps on many occasions, just because I have a relative who lives there, and it's just normal to tunnel through the mountain for a road. Just tunnel through. You don't go over the mountain. You go through the mountain so that you've got a flat road, and that's normal. and they do it so often, and it can be done. And they've got their tunnel boring machines, and you just pull out those and make your tunnel and then continue the roadworks. And, looking at that, and then also the cycling as being a standard way to travel, it can be done. Why isn't that being brought here? Why is that mentality not here? Why is that research not being put into this project and getting around? I don't understand it. Yeah.
And the other one is fast rail, like overseas countries, and China in particular, rolling out fast rail at an enormous pace. We haven't got one smart fast rail project in Australia. And I know we've discussed.
Yeah. I watched a documentary a while ago. Oh, sorry, that was Utopia. Sorry, Utopia. There was something about the fast rail. Yep, go on. Sorry.
and yet, Spain, Italy, all these countries have got fast, high-speed rail. And I know Australia's a lot different to these countries. We're a lot more spread out. But you imagine with what's going on with COVID, if we had a high-speed rail rolling just to Geelong, Like
Yeah.
imagine if Geelong was a 20-minute train trip away. The difference that would make to Geelong. Whereas we got Frankston. Frankston's over. The train to Frankston takes over an hour.
Yeah. Yep.
Like it's quicker. The train from Ballarat's about the same time as the train to Frankston.
I know, isn't it ironic? Yeah.
We are just so far behind,
Mm.
and I think these countries will, if we don't lift our performance economically, these things will continue. Melbourne in particular, but Australia spend more of their percentage of their income on transport than any other country in the world, because of our transport systems are so incredibly ineffective and inefficient.
Yeah.
So we spend an enormous amount of money on transport systems.
Yeah. And they're not all interlinked. Yeah. Yeah. Wow.
Yes.
Okay. So I was just wondering, is there anything else that you're hearing around the traps? Because we'll finish up in a few minutes, but is there anything else that you're hearing around the traps from your community about Northeast Link, any of the forums that you've attended, anything that you're hearing?
No, as most things with the Northeast Link, I've always been, the response, we get the usual people turning up at these events. I think some of the original town hall events we had were very successful. But I think the government's done a very good job of saying that the Northeast Link will fix our congestion problem, and people want to believe that, and most people have believed that, because people want to hear those things. People want to hear, we're going to build you this link which will get you home quicker and safer, and you get to see the freeway that does that. And is it a good use of our resources now? Well, and now, it's interesting when we talk about the need for public transport, and this government did put forward the suburban rail loop, but that was going to be finished in 2050. Now we have, if you looked in Japan, there was companies now that have got these cars, flying cars, they're calling them, which are drones that can carry a human, and they're out there. So you think by the time we build the Northeast Link, which is 7 years away, what progress would they have made to these flying cars or automated cars, where people keep saying that technology is moving on, and it is, to a point where the cars have our problem is in Melbourne is that the number of people per car is being reducing significantly over the years.
Yeah.
Even though we've had lots of campaigns and lots of ways to encourage more people to be in a car, but it's 1.1 person per car now in Melbourne. So and the average car carries 5 people, so it's incredibly inefficient to have 1.1 person per car.
In the car, yeah.
But if we go to this system where no one owns a car anymore, they're all automated cars, and you just press a button on your phone and a car turns up and you get in it, and depending how much you want to pay, whether you get to go straight to where you want to go, or if you agree that you'll get there a bit slower, but you'll pick up 3 or 4 other people on the way, and that'll greatly reduce the fee you pay. Then if we've got 3 or 4 people per car, and those cars can travel much closer together, so that you're going to get much better capacity from the road, and then they drop you off where you want to go out the front, and none of this looking for a car park or...
Yeah.
Does that
so it sounds like it's a bit more
way...
efficient. Yeah.
A lot more efficient. But how far off is that? Well, but then we get back to the jobs situation again. If we advance to that type of world, then you can think there's no more taxi drivers, there's no more bus drivers, there's no more train drivers, there's no more van drivers. Like, if everything is just dropped off by an automated car, then the impact on employment will be enormous. And then some people go a bit further, because these are probably be electric cars. So therefore, the amount of work you need to do to maintain an electric car is a lot less than a petrol car. So mechanics will go. But then if these cars travel around safely and never run into each other, panel beaters will go. We don't need panel beaters anymore. And we'll go away from this concept where everyone's got a car. So the car dealerships have been done very well because everyone's got a car and there's more cars in Melbourne than there are people.
Yeah.
But if we go to a point where no one actually owns a car anymore, you own a service or you pay for a service, there's going to be a lot less cars in Melbourne, but they'll all be on the road all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Currently, 95% of the time your car sits there and does nothing. Only 5% of the time it's actually doing what it's built for.
Especially
so
now.
If you look at the inefficiency, so if the average car's got 5 people in it, but only 1.1 person on average, and it's only used it's not used 95% of the time, it shows you the real inefficiencies in our current transport system.
Yeah, yeah. And you know what? That's something to really think about, isn't it? What you're suggesting. So you have a car service, not a car. And so how does that impact a whole lot of other industries? And it clearly can. That's not to say that there wouldn't be something else that evolves, some other work or industry that evolves from this service, because I have no doubt that it would. We might just not see it yet. That's all. That's all. Yeah.
It is going to be incredible. And I always think back, remember the good old Star Wars movies, and I always think it looks frightening. They show the future cities and they're standing there in a 20-story building. There's things just hovering around. There's just cars and things just moving everywhere.
Same as Back to the Future too.
But I always think it looks like not a peaceful world to be planned. Maybe I'm being... But if you look up, you like to see clouds and sky. You don't want to look up and see just things hovering everywhere. I think it's quite intimidating. It won't be noisy, but it's just not. It's an intimidating look, and it doesn't look a pleasant world to be. It looks like everything's just moved. But then if we go from working from home, why do we need to move around so much?
Exactly. Yeah, we might not need to. So thank you very much, Tom, for chatting with me on Champion Chat. I really appreciate your insights, as others I'm sure will as well, and gets people thinking. So thank you very much for your time. I've really appreciated it and all your thoughts. And I look forward to maybe catching up with you another time on this. So thank you very much.